Hi, everybody. I'm Jordan Ostroff with Legalese Marketing. Joining me today is an awesome guest, Jay Harrington. This is the first time that Jay and I have ever talked. I don't even want to say in person. I've talked to each other through a screen as opposed to going back and forth on LinkedIn. So obviously, Jay's going to be sharing some tips on LinkedIn as well as thought leadership marketing. For those of you that don't know Jay, one, pause this. Well, I guess if you're live, you can't pause it. If you're watching this not live, pause it. Go over to LinkedIn, follow Jay. He posts some fantastic stuff that I look forward to reading every morning, and then play the rest of this. So a little bit about Jay. Went to college to play baseball, went to law school because, and this is how you know he's that honest guy. He went to law school because he's not sure. So chose the law firm job with the highest salary. I don't know, it sounds like a bunch of our listeners, watchers, but then finally figured things out and went to work for himself 15 years ago. Jay provides marketing and PR services for law firms and also coaching and training. What's most unique about him is that they do something that I am sort of envious of, but can definitely say is absolutely what is needed by so many clients. So combining that marketing and business development strategy with training and coaching. So not just the what to do, but the how to do it and the follow-up coaching that is just such a wonderful and sought after thing to combine the know-how with the no-do, with the follow-through, with the accountability. So Jay, thank you so much for being here.
Jordan, it's awesome to be here. Like you said, it's great to be able to, at least, even though it's through a screen, we were able to talk in person as opposed to just typing into LinkedIn and commenting back and forth. So good to meet you and good to be here.
Wonderful. So for everybody who enjoys this show, when you're done with this episode, kick back to the last episode, which aired on Monday with Victor Medina, where we talked about the benefits of coaching for an attorney from that perspective. So Jay, we're going to dive right into it here. What is thought leadership?
So yeah, I mean, especially contextualizing it for the legal community here, but it's basically a way to position yourself as an expert through the content you create. So thought leadership is a term that sort of is nebulous in a sense, but to me, it's basically someone who has expertise is able to look out into the future and sort of chart a course for others through their content. So it's not just recycling, the same old information that everyone else is doing, but it's having a unique point of view based on significant expertise in a subject matter. And then taking that expertise and translating it into content that can appeal to an audience. So it's basically could be video content, audio content, written content, public speaking, whatever the case might be. It's the ability to articulate ideas. And for most lawyers, what the idea is to provide helpful information that positions you as a trusted advisor to prospective clients such that they think of you when opportunities arise that relate to your area of expertise. So that's it in a nutshell.
So to break that down into the dictionary thing. So when we're talking about thought leadership, so in essence, you are the leader of this idea, you are the beginning, one of the first to put this forward, one of the first to go after this, or does that not have to be there?
I mean, you certainly don't have to be first in the sense that you're the only one talking about these ideas. Oftentimes, I'm of the belief that many have stated before that there are no truly original ideas anymore, right? It's more taking ideas that might already be in existence from different domains, whatever, spotting patterns, matching patterns, and being able to contextualize that information for your particular audience. So it's not about necessarily having truly original ideas. It's about how to apply those ideas for the audience that you're trying to serve through your content and ultimately through your legal services.
Yeah, it reminds me of George Carlin had the line about, I can't write anything in my own words because if I did, you would not understand it. So
yeah, exactly.
So can you give us, I mean, obviously, I think thought leadership seems like it's so far in the moment. So can you give us a couple examples of people that were thought leaders, on a topic 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, so that we have an idea of what we're looking for going forward?
I mean, sure. You think about someone, and this is someone who both was a thought leader and then put those ideas into action, but certainly someone like Elon Musk, to use a very famous example, was someone who, back in 2003 sort of looked forward and saw what was coming in terms of the carbon emissions issues and transportation and the ability to bring electric vehicles to the marketplace. And he translated that vision in a way that resonated with the marketplace. And then he built a company on top of it. But his ability to tell a compelling story through his thought leadership is what's largely responsible for I don't know what Tesla's revenue it is, but it's a fraction of its market value, right? They don't sell nearly as many cars as the rest of the industry, but his ability to tell a compelling story around the ideas that he's passionate about and that Tesla is sort of based upon has resulted in, almost $1 billion company right now. I'm sorry, almost $1 trillion company, I should say. So that's one good example. I mean, Warren Buffett, I think, is someone everyone can sort of resonate with the idea of being a thought leader, where he has been able to articulate ideas around investing that have, sort of been the standard bearer of that marketplace for decades now. And he's always sort of seen as someone of great wisdom who should be listened to in that marketplace. So these are examples, very high profile ones, of people who have kind of owned certain ideas, have articulated them clearly and consistently over a period of time, and have reaped tremendous results as a consequence of that thought leadership.
So it almost seems like it's like that forward-thinking futurist personal brand type intersection.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. And I hesitate to use names of luminaries like Elon Musk and Warren Buffett, because sometimes it can make this seem inaccessible to us mere mortals. I just wanted to use examples that maybe everyone could be familiar with. But thought leadership doesn't need to be, again, back to this idea that it's truly original ideas. It really is about understanding what matters to your very small niche audience that you're trying to address, and how can you bring new ideas to the forefront for that audience. And when I say new, it might just, new is also relevant, it's practical, and it's communicated in a language that other people can understand. So it's not academic, it's not highly technical. It's very practical communication style that I think everyone can adopt.
So it sounds like, in essence, from that perspective, a lawyer who comes up with some interesting idea or something that helps their clients maybe get their license back faster after a DUI, something along those lines, that might be thought leadership in that right community.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone who, yes, certainly there's probably thought leaders in that very space that you're talking about, lawyers who help people get their licenses back after a DUI, who probably have all kinds of great tips about how to avoid that circumstance in the first place, right? How do you avoid losing your license in the first place, even if you get pulled over? That person, if they're consistently creating content around that topic, is probably a thought leader in that space. And it's the ability to take your practical knowledge and translate that into actionable advice for your audience that can make you a thought leader, again, in these narrow niches that lawyers tend to compete within.
So how narrow of a niche are we talking about? Like criminal law, DUI law, the specific driver's license issue? Is there the ability to be a thought leader in all of those, or is it really the niche or the easier, not the broader, the unable?
Yeah, so it's more, I always say it's the narrower the better. You have to understand what your marketplace is that you're trying to address. Is it big enough to make sense to target that niche and create content for that niche? If you can check that box, then I'd say, be very narrow in your focus, because that's what's going to allow you to go very deep with your content. And that's what thought leadership is all about. It's about moving past sort of the surface level insights that many other people might be sharing in their content, and going much deeper, and again, contextualizing these issues in a way that others can't, because they're scattered over too many different areas, and they're not able to spot those patterns and connect those dots in the way that someone who's very focused in a narrow niche would be able to.
So it's oil drilling. We're a foot wide, a mile deep, as opposed to just being on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. And one of the things I think with that approach that sometimes is a stumbling block for people when they're first getting started creating content is thinking that, well, I'm not going to possibly have enough things to say or ideas to share if I'm being very narrow with my approach to content. But in my experiences, and I think the experience of most people, is that the narrower you are and the deeper you go, the more ideas that you'll have, because you'll be spotting ideas everywhere. Because again, it's not about like coming up with new ideas yourself. It's about bringing ideas that you're seeing elsewhere into your narrow niche, and your subconscious mind will start working on that problem in the back of your head when you're focused on one thing as opposed to many, and your brain is sort of scattered. You'll have insights that wouldn't be possible for the generalist to have necessarily. The generalist, as it relates to creating content, who just is, doesn't have any real particular focus that they're drilling down on a consistent basis.
Well, I think that kind of works in both directions, because like on the one hand, if your client is everybody, you're never going to be top of mind with anybody because it's too broad. And on the other hand, the more specific you are with this content, almost the more interested everybody is in it. Like I can't imagine a normal person going on somebody's LinkedIn and being interested in a specific form with the IRS. But if you're the go-to tax attorney, then maybe you've got the following that needs to know the difference between a 1040 and a 1020S and a 1099. And I don't even know if any of the numbers I threw out there actually link together in any way, shape, or form. But you have a more engaged audience as well by niching that thought leadership, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about most of our content consumption habits, they're all centered around, finding one person or a couple people that they want to follow for particular topics that relate to your interests or your needs or whatever the case might be. So what you want to be able to do is to define yourself by your expertise as one of the people worth listening to in that narrow space. If you're otherwise famous, you think about starting a podcast, for example. If you're famous, yeah, you might be able to cultivate an audience. But if you're not, like the most of us, you need to be really drilling down on one specific topic that's going to appeal to a certain audience, such that they perceive you as an expert in that space or someone who's interesting in that space worth listening to, as opposed to someone who's trying to cover the gamut of, pop culture, media, government, policy, all these different topics we could be talking about. But if we're talking about all those things, we probably wouldn't have anything that was all that interesting to say about them.
Well, but look, I mean, it's interesting you use the famous word, because like I'm sure that there are hundreds of people that would see this and be like, oh my God, it's Jay Harrington, like Jay speaking. You've written how many books?
3. Number 4 is on the way in a couple of weeks.
So 4 is on the way, and that was the productivity pivot?
No, productivity pivot's out. This next one's called The Outlaw Writer.
The Outlaw. All right, so I wasn't that far off.
Yeah, you were close.
but I mean, but that's the thing is, you may, I don't think people stop you down the street, but like in a situation like this, there are people that are, more interested in hearing you speak than me, than anybody else. So you have also the ability to sort of build that following and build that famousness inside that niche as well.
Yeah, well, you're overstating it for sure, Jordan, to associate the word fame with me in any capacity. But to your point, you are making a good point, which is I devote my entire energy, attention, resources, and content for one niche audience, which is the legal community. So yeah, ultimately, if you're consistent over a decade doing that, like I've tried to be, you're going to have at least some people paying attention to you. And that's the idea. And because if I was to start, oftentimes I think, well, most of my content is relevant to people outside the legal space. It's probably just as relevant to the management consulting community, other forms of consulting, accountants, other professional services providers. But I just think that when you're trying to really attract an audience and gain a following and be able to grab people's attention, if you can speak directly to them and describe and make them feel like you're telling stories and sharing ideas just for them, you're going to have a much easier time gaining that following.
No, I totally agree. So I guess let's sort of go in chronological order. So somebody wakes up and they're like, boom, I want to be a thought leader in this niche. What sort of information or advice do you want to give somebody who's at that stage of the process?
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. So yeah, let's say you want to let's pick something specific. What do you think? Architects, dentists. Let's just pick like a a particular niche that someone might want to be focused on from a content creation or thought leadership
I
standpoint.
mean, you want to do lawyer? That's your niche. That's my niche. So
Sure, that might be easiest. So let's do that. So I mean, I'll talk about my approach. So what if I was starting from scratch? What I would do is to say, okay, I know I want to focus on the legal community. I'd probably niche down further from there. I'd say, am I trying to reach those in private practice? And if so, am I talking to more of a, perhaps a mid-sized to larger firm attorney, or the small firm to solo practice community? Because it's a little different, right? I've been in both. I worked at very big firms, and I had a small firm of my own. And running a small law firm is far different than being an associate or a partner in a big law firm.
So it's like everything's on fire, and you're the only one with a fire extinguisher.
Completely. I had, when I think about when I ran my practice, just like you, Jordan, I mean, HR issues, payroll issues, all the stuff that goes with running a practice. So I would probably make that distinction in terms of how I was thinking about creating content. Next, I would try to understand, okay, where does this target market, this audience of mine, spend their time and attention? So what are they reading? What social media channels are they on? What conferences do they attend? What associations are they members of? All of these things where it's like, where can I get in front of my audience? And more importantly, how can I join the conversation that's happening within that market? So I would study those issues, and I would have a clear understanding of, again, where is my audience spending their time and attention? And then I would dive into that. I would start thinking about what are the challenges, questions, pain points that audience is grappling with. So in this case, for talking about the legal industry and marketing and business development related issues concerning that marketplace, I would start to drill down on, what are those burning questions, and how can I start to address them through my content? That might require research. It might require having conversations with those in that marketplace to understand what those questions are. And this sort of process of thinking about, first market definition, identifying I like to call them water coolers around those in the market, gather and start to converse. And then what are the burning questions that I can address in my content that's going to make it resonant with my audience? That would be the first 3 stages of getting started.
So when you're saying water cooler, I mean, are we talking like a group on Facebook versus LinkedIn, like the where these people are at scale?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's a I'm using water cooler as a metaphor for like, where are people gathering and having conversations? So that might be LinkedIn, it might be Facebook, it might be the annual conference that you're attending, it might be making sure you're appearing in the trade journal that all of these people are reading. Wherever that conversation is occurring, I would want to get myself immersed within it. And by doing that, what that allows you to do is start to be seen as someone who's a trusted insider, as opposed to someone who's just trying to target that market with, marketing messages, aggressively, advertising to it, but rather you're seen as a helpful resource for those people such that they welcome you into that conversation.
I mean, and that's a fine line. And 2, I mean, almost everything you talked about is the same thing I would say to a law firm starting their marketing plan. Mm-hmm. I mean, in essence, you're trying to identify your who and you're trying to identify your where. And then, it's just going to be a question of how.
Right. Yeah. And the how comes down to basically, are you going to try to buy attention, or are you going to try to earn it? And that's where, thought leadership is all about earning attention. It's not to say that there's not a place for buying attention. We advocate, different paid campaigns on behalf of our clients all the time. But, if you're thinking of yourself as an individual lawyer who wants to play the long game when it comes to, marketing and thinking about the compounding returns on your marketing effort, certainly at least having some component of thought leadership marketing in the mix, such that you're building your personal brand and people can find you and you're highly visible in the digital domain, then I think that's worth the effort.
Yeah, no, totally. So before we shift into sort of during the journey, so this was sort of the, planning for the journey. Anything else we need to cover in that stage?
I mean, I think those are the big categories of information. I mean, again, think narrow, really understand who your target audience is, understand where they're spending their time and attention, and try to have a clear understanding of what are the trending issues, the important issues that they're facing, such that you can address them through your content.
All right. So now, we came up with our idea to do it. We've got our group, we want to target lawyers. We're walking down that path. We decide, let's say it's LinkedIn. I'm assuming patience and consistency will be huge
Yep.
things to talk about. So what are the tips and tricks during the doing of the becoming a thought leader?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first it's important to understand, like, how are you going to, when we're thinking about the how are you going to start creating and delivering content? There's different ways to do it, as we talked about. And so you can create audio content, you can write, you can create video content, you can do all of the above. And sometimes that's advisable, but I would say keep it simple. Try to spend your time doing something that you feel like you have aptitude for, that you enjoy doing. Any form of content that I describe will work. It doesn't really matter, but what matters is that it's something you can keep up with. Because as you said, Jordan, consistency is critical here, and consistency both in terms of having a clear point of view and also expressing that view on a regular basis. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, thought leadership marketing works best when it's done on that consistent basis, where you're continuing to stay top of mind in front of your audience. The whole purpose here is to be in a position where you don't have to feel like you're always selling in the traditional sense of the word, but rather you're showing up in a way that your prospective clients see as value added. And as a result of that, because business development, legal engagement opportunities are unpredictable, it's hard to know when a litigation matter is going to come up that for one of your prospective clients. And but by being top of mind, like posting on LinkedIn consistently or Facebook or wherever your target market spends their time and attention, you'll naturally be thought of as the person who can help address that opportunity when it does in fact arise. So that consistency is key, and making sure that you're doing something that you have aptitude for and you enjoy will make it more likely that you are consistent. So I think that's really important. And then, I mean, there's all kinds
Can I
of
jump in for a second before you go
please do.
So I get what you're saying, and I'm curious, like, how much of a role does the audience's consumption habits come into that? Because obviously, like, I 100% agree with you. If you hate doing video, probably video is not the thing for you. If you like speaking, a podcast or Clubhouse or something like that might be better. But how much weight do you have to give to your audience's consumption habits?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to take that into account. I mean, I don't give as much weight to the idea that, there's all these demographic differences that lead to, the need to create one form of content for one audience over another. You know what I mean? I haven't seen that necessarily. I mean, people still read. They might be more likely to read, short content versus long form content. But I don't know. I haven't seen too many target market audiences where I've advised clients like, oh, it's definitely audio for this market. That's all they do. They don't read. So I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm not as big of a proponent of really saying you should, that it's more important to have an understanding of your client's audience or your audience's content consumption habits versus your own preferences and strengths as it relates to content creation. Because I think there's a place for all forms of content for every audience.
Yeah, I guess.
Do you think differently?
Well, so that's my follow-up question, because that's my point. Like, the reason that we do this on Facebook Live is I'm going to rip the audio and turn this into a podcast. We're going to cut the video up for shorter social media consumption in 30, 60-second, 2-minute clips. People have the full show live. They can drop comments in here and interact with us at the same basis. We can take some of these longer ideas, pull the transcript from Rev or Otter, turn those into blog posts. I just, to me, I don't see the downside of being able to repurpose into 4 or 5 different ways with the content that you're doing. And so I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I absolutely agree with that. And that's a great point. And I mean, I do that as well. So the way I think about my content is LinkedIn is almost always the starting point. And I know we're going to get into LinkedIn in more detail shortly, but LinkedIn's always the starting point. To me, it's the place that I use as a testing ground for ideas, right? You have to invest a lot to write, say, a 1,500 word article on a topic. And that's a big investment to make without having a clear understanding of whether those ideas are resonant with your audience. It's better to write a 200 word LinkedIn post get some actual market feedback in terms of, are people reacting well to that content or that idea? And then if that's the case, then that's a great signal that may be a piece of content to build out into longer form. And then I do the same thing. If I write an article about something, even if I don't, I often will use LinkedIn posts as a way to create ideas for podcast content. So me and my co-host will do a podcast episode about it. So yes, taking an idea, thinking of content creation around ideas as opposed to, particular means of or mediums of content is the way to start. And then take those ideas and yeah, by all means, put them in different forms of content: audio, video, written word.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that I always struggle with when it comes to marketing. Like, there isn't that moment when like an angel comes down and says, "Hey, congratulations, you're now a thought leader." Like,
Yep.
how do you know that you're even getting closer, let alone knowing that you're there? What are some of the signs that you're going to see during this journey?
Yeah. So, one of the obvious, most measurable ones would be, assuming you are active, you're creating content, and you're either creating content directly on social media or you're sharing content into social media. You should be seeing follower growth, right? I mean, that would be one clear sign. If your audience isn't growing in some way as measured by your network growth, that's probably a sign that your ideas aren't landing particularly well, and maybe you need to rethink things a little bit. So that there are these near-term sort of leading indicators like audience growth, reaction to the content that you're creating and sharing. Then those are very measurable. And then there's other things like, are you getting inbound opportunities to like appear on podcast episodes or webinars? Or because people, I always like to say that the opportunities for marketing that you'll generate off of social media will oftentimes be as a result of your activity on social media, because the gatekeepers to those opportunities are looking for people who they perceive as thought leaders or have interesting ideas to invite on their platforms. And so if your ideas are resonating, you'll probably start to experience some of those inbound opportunities for off social media marketing. And those are all leading indicators as to whether your thought leadership is working. And then the big lagging indicator is you should start to probably be getting new business opportunities out of it. Again, inbound opportunities. So people who, there's two objectives to thought leadership. One is to generate awareness about yourself and your ideas. And that is reflected in things like your audience is growing. And then it's also to build trust that you're the expert for the job. And that is reflected oftentimes in you're getting more new business and referral opportunities from the work you're putting in to share your ideas, because people are coming to trust that you're the right expert for the job over time.
So, and I don't know if I'm just going to ask the question now instead of saving it for later. So you're talking about that audience growth, and I think that is also a growth of engagement as well. I mean, hopefully, as you go from 1,000 followers to 5,000 followers, your comments go from 10 to 50 or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I don't think there's a right growth number over time, right? I mean, that's more okay.
No, I agree with you. I don't think that's the case at all, because it all ties back to the aggregate size of your network or your audience matters far less than the composition of that audience, right? I'd much rather have a network of 2,000 highly engaged people who are decision makers than I would rather have 20,000 followers, most of which can have no impact whatsoever on my business. So give me a small audience that is highly impactful and is of the right composition over a big audience any day. And by, if that's the audience you're targeting, like those high-end decision makers, well, your audience is going to grow more slowly, but each person you add to that audience could have a bigger impact on your success.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember where I saw this, but something was like, if your average sales thing is $10,000 and you add, one person a month and who ends up hiring you, you're looking at whatever that is, 120,000. Whereas if you add, a million followers that never buy from you, that's $0.
Right, exactly. I mean, it sort of relates. You've probably heard of the Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans sort of
Yeah.
methodology, right? So the idea that you get to that, the whole point of that is if you get to the point where you have 1,000 true fans, and what he's defining as a true fan would be someone who's actually buying from you, right? You don't need 100,000 true fans. You just need 1,000, and you can make a good living. And so that is done by, having a sort of a minimum viable audience, as Seth Godin puts it, and really appealing to them in a way that someone who isn't speaking directly to that audience can't.
It's amazing to me that in essence, you are like democratizing your knowledge base in exchange for the support and relationship of those who found so much free value in so much of what you did that they're willing to pay that back into, paid opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the reciprocity that you're hoping for, but you do have to go into this sort of with a belief that will come, but not fixating on the outcome, because it will take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So you have to be willing to give a lot of value before ever really having an expectation or of reciprocity from your audience. I mean, I think Gary Vee refers to it as what jab, 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 right hook, right? You got to throw a lot of jabs before you can expect, to get much from what you're doing. But there's a long tail to this, right? I mean, it's what you're trying to do is create a body of work that makes you visible. And especially if you're looking to like scale your practice or move beyond your immediate geographic limitations or boundaries. If you can become a thought leader, there's no assuming your licensing and ethical rules and jurisdictional limitations will allow your practice to travel beyond borders. There's nothing stopping lawyers who don't have those limitations from building a national practice, because they're starting to be seen as high valued experts in niche domains who are relevant to everyone everywhere, especially in this time where, again, geography matters far less than it used to.
Yeah, and I love that you use the jab, jab, right hook, because I think a lot of people, like, the more you jab, the less money you make tomorrow, but the more money you make in the long term. The more you right hook, the more you make money now, but the less you make in the long run, because you're just constantly trying to make it clear that you're monetizing the audience.
Right, and you lose trust, or you never get it in the first place, and that's like you said, you might be able to shake a few dollars out of the tree today, but you won't have an audience that trusts you for the long term.
So what other insight or wisdom do you have for people as they're continuing down that journey to become a thought leader or to maintain being a thought leader?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, as we were just talking about, is you've got to be going into this with the long-term mindset that, this is not going to happen overnight. This is something you're going to have to put consistent effort into. And you're going to really have to be, looking at this as if it's something that is part of your daily practice, right? Where you're investing in yourself and you're investing in the future of your practice. So I would understand that it's definitely a journey that you've got to travel, and it won't happen overnight. So that's something big. And then I would say too, don't overlook things like, the ability to collaborate in thought leadership content. You don't necessarily need to do it all yourself. Like, it's a great way to network with other people, whether that's having a podcast and inviting people who you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach and connect with to be guests on your show. Don't overlook that opportunity. Oftentimes you can get a prospective client to come on your podcast in a way that you would never be able to do if you were just inviting them out for lunch or something like that. So do that. And then also, I think it's important to have a platform somewhere where you can send people back to. That might be your website. You might be directing them to your LinkedIn page, or whatever your platform is. But don't feel like you need to invest in building platforms that are uniquely your own for all forms of content that you're creating. Like, for example, you don't need to have a podcast to get the benefits of podcasting. There are a lot of podcasters out there who would love to have you on as a guest, for example, if you have something interesting to say. So leverage their audiences. Use these arbitrage principles where it's like you don't need to think about, you can leverage other people's audiences in a way that will allow you to reach way more people in your target audience way faster than you could ever do yourself if you were trying to build a platform from scratch. So try to, instead of maybe having a blog or supplementary to having your own blog, look for publishing opportunities in well-regarded, well-respected, well-read publications that, that are the again, getting back to this idea of water coolers, that are part of the water cooler of the target market that you're trying to seek. So I think those are big things to think about. Is you don't have to build everything on your own. Collaborate with people, find and leverage the audiences that other people have built in your target market.
Well, and I gotta take my hat off to you, because I think the first time I came across you, if not one of the early times, was you and Steve Fretzen did a joint podcast, and the two of you, in essence, work with very similar clients, and I think you and I work with very similar clients. But I love the way you guys did the Dueling Banjos podcast, and it's so interesting to see people that should be competitors agreeing, because everybody's saying the right stuff, and really inaction is often our biggest competition.
Totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I think when we think about a market that we serve, if there's no competitors in that market, that's a big red flag for me. I think you want a certain number of competitors. So when you're thinking about what niche to define for your thought leadership or for your practice, you want competitors, because then there's actually business to be had in that marketplace. Perhaps not too many, but at least some number of them. And then the pie is almost always big enough, and you can grow it together. So yeah, I think that, and that's actually a really good point, Jordan, because that's another component of becoming a thought leader, is having that abundance mindset as opposed to a scarcity mindset, where there's enough for all of us and we can all grow this pie together if we work together and share ideas freely. And if you have that scarcity mindset, thinking that, if you share your ideas, someone will steal them, or if you go on someone else's show, then you're just promoting their services over your own. Well, that's never been my experience, and I've always found that being very abundant with ideas and time and that kind of thing is always redounded to my benefit, and I think other people's as well.
Makes total sense. All right, so now we're getting to the Jordan Ostroff selfish hour of this conversation. We're talking about LinkedIn tips. So before we get into this, I want to kind of go through the methodology of why LinkedIn, from the standpoint of that water cooler. Why is LinkedIn the right water cooler for you, so that other attorneys can help decide if that's the right place for them?
Okay, well, so again, my target audience is the legal community, and for me, LinkedIn is the place that aligns with my target audience, so lawyers, as well as my content topics, which is legal marketing and business development. So those are, I know that I have people who are interested in those topics on that platform, and so for me, it's the right place to be. And I think that's, you use that calculus. So for other people, if I was an attorney who had legal services, maybe in an IP practice that focused on like representing photographers or other creative artists, it might be Instagram. It just depends on where your audience is and the type of content that they're consuming. So that's why LinkedIn is for me.
Yeah, and so I want to give a couple examples just to help people here. So business law attorney looking for small to medium-sized business owners, I think LinkedIn's great. Criminal defense attorney looking for people that just got arrested by the police, probably not LinkedIn. I love trademark and trademarks and patents and stuff. I think that's so true, because you have that kind of that two-way. If I'm dealing with the older school company, they're going to be on LinkedIn. If I'm dealing with the newer school company, the more creative, probably Instagram. So I love that as a really good example of people. So by that token, there are certain attorneys that have no business being on LinkedIn other than to get great ideas from people like you from there, and not so much looking at LinkedIn as a way for them to get clients.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I would say that may still be a reason for them to be on there, Jordan, would be, other lawyers obviously are a source of new business. So, I mean, for referral relationships, that might be a good spot to be, or even for recruiting employees, that kind of thing. So at least having a presence there, to the extent that referrals are important to your business, or potentially recruiting for new talent, those might be two reasons. But you're right in the sense that depending on your practice, probably the end client might not be there ultimately.
Yeah, and that's such a strong distinction. So I think the easiest example then is like personal injury. You may not find clients on there, but doctors, orthos, chiropractors, primary care physicians,
Yeah.
You may be able to engage with them at scale on LinkedIn.
For sure. Right. So yeah, think about what is your intention? Like what's your goal with respect to each social media platform? I mean, in an ideal world, you don't have to be on more than one. Cause I mean, I find I've sort of just gone all in on LinkedIn because I can't really figure out some of the other ones. And I don't know, to me, it's a distraction, but your business goals might it might require you to be on more than one platform. So I think you should just think strategically and purposefully about that.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm Facebook, LinkedIn, and then repurposing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I do a lot on TikTok now, but that's me and my 3-year-old telling bad dad jokes to each other. So
Nice.
it's a much different game plan over there. So I mean, look, I have followed your stuff well enough to know that we could talk about your LinkedIn tips for easily over an hour. I think the stuff that you post is so genuine and engaging and insightful and helpful, all while not being too wordy. So how do you get to that? What are some of the tips? What would be the biggest piece of advice you have for people on LinkedIn to grow that following?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Biggest tips. I mean, one, like me, maybe spend 10 years creating content elsewhere until you really figured it out. And then, with all that practice, apply that to LinkedIn. But barring that, I do think there's a few principles to be thinking about here. One is this idea of consistency. You don't need to be spending a ton of time on LinkedIn, but if you're going to be there and you want to be perceived as a thought leader and really, grow your network and start to see results from that, the consistency of effort is definitely key. And then again, getting back to this idea of like, know what you're doing there. I like to think of, having a couple content pillars. So what are the core ideas that you're creating content around? And then staying in that lane as much as possible. It doesn't mean that you can't ever deviate from it, but you want people to come to expect something from you so you can meet that expectation. So I try not, I'm generally writing about LinkedIn tips, marketing, and business development issues. Sometimes I deviate a little bit out of that, but I find that, if I'm staying in that lane, my audience has an expectation around that. They will, generally read my content and react well to it. If I was always bouncing around quite a bit, I wouldn't really be able to gain traction maybe the way that I would otherwise. And I think that's important. I think that you should be thinking in terms of maybe having a mix of things where you're sharing some subject matter expertise around what you do, and then also injecting some personality into your content as well. So I think that's important. So it doesn't mean you're just always sharing ideas about, the legal issues that you are addressing, but rather showing some of your humanity and personality in your content as well, because, I think it's cliche, but, people hire the lawyer and not the law firm, but just because it's cliche doesn't mean it's true. So I think people like to get to know who they're dealing with or potentially dealing with through their content. So having that mix, even on LinkedIn, which of course is a professional social media platform, as they say, a professional network, but still showing some of your human side in the process is important in terms of building your brand and gaining attention on the platform. One of the biggest mistakes I see, Jordan, what most lawyers make, or many lawyers make, especially as you're getting started with getting active on LinkedIn, is a belief that LinkedIn is a link sharing platform first and foremost. And what I mean by that is they're using it as a way to market or promote content they've written elsewhere, and sharing links to that content, whether it's on their blog or their website, on LinkedIn. And that's all well and good. But LinkedIn, like other social media platforms, they don't want people to leave LinkedIn. So they don't give distribution to that content the way that they do if you're creating content that lives natively on the platform. So you're writing a text post. We exchanged comments yesterday about how terrible the LinkedIn article publishing platform is. It's the worst. So to me, the best way to leverage LinkedIn is to just simply write just good old-fashioned text posts, the 1,300 character limited posts that you can write right in the feed, because that's what LinkedIn is giving distribution to, and why fight the algorithm? So going from the mindset that LinkedIn is a place where you share content from your blog to starting to think about it as your blog is a big mindset shift that can really change your results and your trajectory on the platform.
Yeah, I can't believe that was only yesterday. Yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking about it. So let me flip the question a little bit more specific then. How much of your time on LinkedIn is you writing these text posts versus engaging with the comments back versus engaging with other people's posts?
I would say it is. I would say it's 75 writing. I would say it's 10. I got to do the math here. 15 engaging in comments to my posts, and probably 10 engaging with other people's posts. Now, I'm just trying to be honest. I don't think it. I think it should be different than that. Like it would be more effective if I was spending more time engaging with other people's content. But I just have to limit myself in terms of the amount of time I feel like I can spend, and it seems to be working okay. But I know I could probably have more success if I was spending more time engaging with other people's content. So I try to do that, but I want to be doing more of it. But I do focus most of my time on creating the content. So let's say I probably spend an hour a day investing in LinkedIn. So that's kind of how it breaks down. Sometimes it's quicker. I do try to do things like batch write content for LinkedIn because I'm posting there every day, and that can be a lot. But if I allocate 90 minutes, I can usually knock out like 5 or more posts in that 90-minute period. Whereas if I just sit down cold to write a single post, that might take me 45 minutes in some instances, depending on what I'm writing about. You know how it goes. I mean, you write too, Jordan, obviously. Sometimes they just pour out of you, and sometimes it's like a mighty struggle. But that's kind of how it breaks down. But I do think that for people who are just getting started, they should be investing more time in that engagement piece, almost flipping that equation where they're popping up on other people's feeds through comments, through reacting to people's content. That'll help them build an audience and also observe what's working for other people such that they can apply some of those same principles.
So I want to get on a soapbox then about that point, because I totally agree with you. Yeah. So the 2 parts of my soapbox: 1, the LinkedIn headline, I think, is the most powerful tool across any social media platform. 2, nobody cares that you are attorney at law firm name. Please, dear God, do not let that be your headline. Please, dear God, because what Jay just said is so true. When you're first starting on LinkedIn and you comment on, you can comment on Gary Vee's post, you can comment on Simon Sinek, you can comment on, any John Morgan, whoever else you want. But I swear to God, if your headline just says attorney at blah, 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 like there's not going to be anything that comes from that. If you really focus on who you help and how you help them or something along those lines, you're going to be able to draw thousands of eyeballs on other people's posts that see your face, see your name, and see what you actually do. Because I'm right there with you, Jay. I mean, everybody that I talk to who's not getting enough out of LinkedIn, it's because they're writing too much and not engaging enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's about observing. Like there were a lot of stuff I didn't know. My activity on LinkedIn has only really been, in the last year, even less than that. I mean, I was always on LinkedIn, but I was using it wrong. And then I started paying attention, and then it started clicking. I was just like, and then it seemed obvious as to what you needed to do. But if I had just been getting in, sharing links to content, getting out, and not really trying to follow and watch what people who clearly had gotten it before me had been doing, I still would have been doing the wrong things. And yeah, you're right. The LinkedIn headline is key to that, because it immediately allows people to understand at a glance, exactly what value you can deliver and what you do.
Yeah, and along those lines, so what I always tell people, and let me know if you have a different view, like you obviously, follow these people with 100,000 plus followers, but you're not going to be replicating what they do. You're going to replicate the things done by people with 3,000 to 5,000 followers, and then as you get closer to that, then you want to replicate what's being done at the people 7,500 to 10,000 followers, and you want to keep staying, that 1 or 2 levels behind in terms of like specific tactics that you're copying. Are you with me on that one?
Yeah, I am. And frankly, like I feel that I feel like the people with 100,000 plus followers oftentimes have the worst content. You know what? I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like it sometimes can get lazy, right? Where you have that big of an audience, anything you write, it's just sort of fanboy reaction effect to that content. So you see a lot of the, hey, drop your name in the comments, or just like they start to have these posts where it's not really adding value anymore. It's just about creating churn and everyone's reacting, trying to be the first into the comments. So I like to follow the people who are clearly like putting effort in, like a smaller follower count, who are really hustling and trying to bring value to the content they're creating. And to me, that's interesting. And if you can sustain that, because I bet you most of those people that have those super high follower counts, there's one of three reasons. A, they're famous. B, they got lucky in the sense that, sometimes lucky is probably the wrong word, but let's just say maybe they were early. They've been on LinkedIn creating content for a long time, and they just had the first mover advantage. Or C, it could be luck, like meaning they could have had a massive viral post that allowed them to add 20,000 followers like over a course of a week, and that happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best content creators that you should be mimicking. But so to your point, you should be following, to me, the people who are growing their network, who are consistent, who are intriguing, who are sharing, these interesting ideas on the platform, but don't necessarily have, massive followings, because someone might be doing it for those people anyway. You find that to be the case too, where once you get to a certain point of followers on the platform, I feel like oftentimes it may not even be the person who's got the account that's actually creating most of the content.
Makes total sense. All right. So as we reach the end, any other insider wisdom on the LinkedIn tips you want to make sure that we share?
I think just a focus on both creating content, engaging with other people's content, and then having a kind of an intentional network building strategy around what you're doing too, because it's great. The more content you create, the more content you engage with on other people's threads, you'll get inbound connection requests, but don't overlook the work that you want to do to build your own network as well. And you be mindful of the composition of the network you want to create, because the more people you add to your network from your niche around the content ideas that you're sharing, the more that audience is going to find that content relevant, react to it. You'll create this positive flywheel effect around your content, the more densely populated with your target audience your network is. So I'd say that's one big factor that people should be thinking about.
Makes perfect sense. I love the power of the algorithm to get you in front of the right people and get the right eyeballs on your stuff in both directions.
For sure. Yep.
So, all right. So for all of our fans of the show, we had a swap on Monday, so it will not be Colin Levy. Instead, on Monday, we're going to have BJ Bernstein. BJ is going to come to talk to us about Zoom advocacy. So she's going to share some tips and tricks on how you can be the most engaging and persuasive lawyer you can be while we remain stuck behind a screen, for better or worse, depending upon your own personal feelings on virtual court, remote court. I don't know how to phrase that correctly. So, but I am not going to let Jay go without one more thing. So, Jay, this is Exhibit A Attorneys, where we talk about what it takes to truly be the Exhibit A of a successful attorney. So if somebody's listened to this for the last, 55 minutes, and they take nothing else from this but what you're about to share here right now, what is the biggest takeaway to turn people into successful lawyers?
Well, I would say what I optimized for when I was practicing law was autonomy more than anything. I found that autonomy, the ability to have more control over my circumstances, was the number one factor in my career satisfaction and my personal happiness. So if I'm to share, what really mattered to me, and I think there's a bunch of studies that suggest that autonomy is the thing that brings us the most happiness, not money, not status. Autonomy is key. To me, that's all about building a practice. Having clients of your own, so you're not beholden to colleagues who have their own books of business, and you're just a service lawyer serving someone else's priorities. So my big tip would be, if you're going to optimize for that, you need to start treating yourself as your own most important client. And as Charlie Munger once said, you need to start selling yourself 1 hour of your time each day to work on things like marketing and business development. You need to block time on your calendar and start serving your own priorities and not just your client priorities that need to be handled. But you should take care of your own priorities first and sell yourself that hour each day for marketing and business development.
Such a great and such a small commitment that compounds over time very quickly.
Totally.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've got hcommunications.biz. I've got your LinkedIn link here. We've got Harrington Communications LinkedIn page. We've got productivitypivot.com. How do people get more in touch with you? How do they keep in the thought leadership circle of Jay Harrington?
I mean, I would say certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm generally sharing everything that I'm creating. We do put out weekly blog posts and have a newsletter. If you go to my website, you can actually download. We have a new download available that has some really good LinkedIn tips in it, I think. And then the only other thing I'd mention, Jordan, was I do have a podcast called the Thought Leadership Project, where we put out weekly episodes on types of topics we talked about today. So that'd be another place to follow me.
Fantastic. Breezy, do you have the link for Jay's podcast? No. All right. So we will get that after we cut this feed, and we'll make sure that is a comment on this podcast as well. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Jordan, it was great. I look forward to connecting with you off of LinkedIn again sometime. Maybe I'll have you on my podcast if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Anytime. We can merge ecosystems in that direction.
Perfect.
I'm down.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Exhibit A Attorneys. If you're interested in becoming the Exhibit A of successful attorney, please check us out at legaleasemarketing.com, EASE.